Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are in the relatively early stages of the 2023 to 2024 offseason, but after a couple of big trades to bring on a couple of big players, we've probably done most of our big action for this offseason. For those who didn't watch the past episode, the two big trades we made were picking up Trevor Rogers. Had to give away one of the top prospects in our system, one of our top three pitching prospects, number 19 prospect in the game to bring him on board, but we now definitely have a clear number one starter, at least for us. And then we also made a big trade to bring in center fielder Kyle Lewis, who has a hopefully major league average type bat and really good glove in center field to stabilize that position after we've gotten very little offense from Michael A. Taylor at that position for the past few years. So those were the two big trades that we've made already in the early stages of this offseason. And at this point, we've got only $1.7 million for free agents. So clearly not going to be doing a lot the rest of the way. Looking at our pitching rotation right now, Trevor Rogers slots in as our number one starter. Looking at our potential lineups, Kyle Lewis, center fielder against both lefties and righties. At this point, I think I'm going to consider trading away Joc Pederson. We're paying him $6 million this year. He is an average-ish type bat who can play both corner outfield slots, could play center field for us in a pinch, although certainly not optimal. But with Kike Hernandez, Juan Yepez, Jeff McNeil, and then even potentially Vinny Pasquantino, I feel like we've got enough corner outfielders, and maybe freeing up the money from Pederson's contract will allow us to put a little bit of money back into our scouting budget and development budget, so at least we're not moving backwards from where we were in 2023. And then a little bit of extra money will also give us a little flexibility as we get closer to next season and perhaps even into the season and closer to the trade deadline to take on a little bit of a contract if we see one player out there who we think can really help us in a push for a playoff spot or a winning record next season. So gonna see what we might be able to get for Joc Pederson, but I think honestly, I'm gonna be okay if it's really just a salary dump and we don't really get much that's gonna help us right now for him. $6 million for a backup outfielder is a luxury that I don't think the Royals can really afford. So it may just be time to move on from him with the addition of Lewis, Yepez becoming a pretty good bat, and Kike Hernandez giving us a little more versatility. I'd say I'd rather have him in center field than Pederson in a pinch if Lewis does get hurt. And then there's still potential for McNeil to spend some time in those corner outfield spots also, since we signed him through arbitration. So going to look to perhaps trade away Joc Pederson and then kind of move forward probably relatively quickly with the rest of the offseason. And it does kind of look like if we do get rid of Joc Pederson that it's just going to really be a little bit of a minor salary dump by us. Jojo Romero from the Phillies is probably the most interesting person out there. Lefty reliever. His split suggests that it'll be a little more effective against lefties than righties, but pretty average at best pitching profile, particularly for a reliever, average at best. But he's not making a ton of money, and he has one option year left this upcoming season. So he's somebody we could have in AAA. A little bit of organizational depth, most importantly, would just get Pederson off of the roster, which would save us some money. Honestly, I don't love bringing him on board. We'll see whether the Phillies are willing to keep some of his contract. And yeah, they're willing to keep 35% of his contract, which will save us even a little bit more money. Our assistant GM doesn't like it, but sometimes their advice isn't particularly great. I kind of like it in terms of opening up a little cash. We've got the optionality to put Jojo Romero at AAA, which is likely where he will end up, but does give us a little depth next year if we have some pitching injuries. And I just think $6 million for a fourth or possibly even fifth outfielder is a luxury that we can't afford. So I'd rather use that money for something else, even if it's just scouting and player development. So we are going to go ahead and complete that trade. Joc Pederson is gone. It is what it is. And with the money that we did free up by trading away Joc Pederson, going to move our scouting budget back to the $20 million that it was last season, and also move player development up to the $32 million that it was at last season. Still obviously have some time to tweak these before we get to spring training, but that leaves us about $3 million for free agents. Probably not going to go too wild with free agents, but that does mean that we'll have a little bit of flexibility in our financial situation if we make some trades and or do look at free agents when we get closer to the season or into the 2024 season. And one thing that I did forget to do in the last episode, kind of went through all the players that we talked about in arbitration, but I didn't go back to October, and I realized that I forgot to mention a couple of minor trades. Basically, this was just cleaning up the 40-man roster. We traded away Austin Cox, Daniel Lynch, and Marlon Willis to get a left-handed pitching prospect, as well as $1 million from the Diamondbacks. Traded away another couple borderline pitchers for our major league club in Colin Snyder and Josh Staumont to the Twins for Cody Greenhill, who could become a decent major league reliever, and also got some cash back from them. And then most interestingly, perhaps, we traded away outfielder Kyle Isbell to Oakland for Shea Langelier. He's kind of just organizational insurance for us at catcher. You can see his bat really hasn't developed much at all, but a solid defensive catcher. So the hope is that if we do have any injuries at the major league level to MJ Melendez or Cam Gallagher, that he could step in and give us at least good defense in our backup catcher spot if we needed it. So forgot to mention that was the other activity we did to kind of clean up the 40-man, give us some space here with only 34 players on the 40-man right now, as we are going to be approaching the Rule 5 draft in about a month. And speaking of trades, got the good suggestion from Losing Streak 12 to maybe check in on some of the trades we've made over the past couple years. So going to look right now at the trades we made early in the 2022 season, our first season running the team, that really kind of cleared up some salary for us and kind of set us on the path to investing a lot more into scouting and player development, which have, I think, been big tools for us thus far. So trading away Carlos Santana, who was making big money and is a mid-30s aged power-hitting first baseman, not great defensively, was a luxury that we didn't feel we could afford. We actually had to give away several players, Noah Murdoch, Samuel Valerio, Luis Cepeda, and Luca Tresh, to get the Phillies to take that contract off our hands, although we did get Alec Boehm in return, who we've subsequently dealt to the Angels last season. But Santana has already retired. After that 2022 season with Philadelphia, only had 145 at-bats, 5 homers, hit .248. So I think it was a good move to get him off of our books and to start investing that money into our farm system. The Zach Greinke trade was similar. Was just trying to get salary off of our books in a year that we knew we would not be competing. We had to give away Drew Parrish, who's now a free agent, and Steve Lombardozzi. So nothing too significant there. And then we got Juan Yepez in return, who has turned into a pretty solid little hitter for us. Although he's 6'1", 200 pounds, so I guess he's not really that little. But hit 17 homers, drove in 69 runs for us last year in 120 games. Has a pretty decent batting profile. He slots in right now as our DH. He does have the versatility to play several defensive positions, but none of them all that well. So he's looking like our starting DH for the next several years. With a little bit of pop in his bat. So the fact that we were able to get a contributor, get a big contract off of our books, and similar to Santana, Greinke retired after that one season in St. Louis, did all right for them, going 7-3 with a win-loss record. But when you look at the peripheral numbers, the 5.76 ERA, 1.66 WHIP, -3 WAR, 5.22 Sierra, kind of had a rough season in that final year for the potential Hall of Famer Greinke. So I think that's another trade that definitely worked out well for us. We also traded away Andrew Benintendi, along with Anthony Simonelli, who's still a prospect, but probably not a great prospect, and got Davis Daniel, a little bit of cash, and Jose Suarez. Suarez was hurt when we picked him up, had big hopes for him. He did pitch 33 games for us last year, all starts, pretty close to league average with a 99 ERA plus and a 100 FIP minus. So he is a respectable major league starter for us at this point. This trade is kind of a yawn. It was good to get off Benintendi's salary from our books. He split last season between a bunch of teams, actually, looking at it. He was with the Angels after we traded him, and then played in Double-A and Triple-A, and then looks like he went over to the Twins organization where he spent some time in the majors and then some time in AAA. So did hit 291 with a 120 OPS plus for the Twins last year, but only 86 at-bats for the major league level. So again, not all that significant in terms of a big winner or a big loser on this trade, at least in my view. And then, of course, the biggest trade and the biggest salary dump was the maybe bold at the time move we made to get rid of our best player, Salvador Perez, to the Yankees. We traded him along with a couple of very mediocre prospects for some cash. Hayden Wesneski, who has slotted in, is a member of our rotation. Started 32 games for us last year, doesn't have great stamina, only went 144 innings, and he's also used as a follower sometimes by Matheny. But, 96 ERA plus, 102 FIP minus, just another one of these solid major league average type starters for our team, which hopefully bringing on Rogers lets all of those guys slot a little further behind in the rotation, make them maybe a little more successful. And then we also got Ricardo Cabrera, only 19 years old at this point, split last season between A-ball and high A-ball, hit 320 in Class A, 258 in high A. Still kind of profiles as a potentially above average hitter, have had him playing short and third base, probably need to train him up a little bit to play second base. Could also certainly play a corner outfield spot for us in a pinch. Has potential still to be a decent major league bat, rated the number 82 prospect in baseball. So picking up Wisniewski and Cabrera, I think, was a reasonable return for a somewhat older player on a big contract. But Perez has remained a pretty productive player for the Yankees, although not to the level of production he had when he led the team and the league with 48 homers and 121 runs batted in 2021 with the Royals. But splitting time between the Royals and Yankees in 2022, he hit 25 home runs with 71 driven in, batting average over 250. Last year he slipped back a bit, only played 96 games, so I'm guessing maybe he got banged up a little bit. Yeah, bone marrow edema in the wrist took him out for 5 weeks, so that certainly didn't help him. Hit 18 homers, drove in 44 runs, but batted just 224, and his OPS plus down to an 83, WRC plus down to an 82. And he still has 2 more years at $20 million plus, followed by a team option. So given that, Wisniewski contributes as a starter for us, I think that was a good trade also. So, we'll try to do more of this where I look back at the decisions we've made and with the benefit of hindsight and time, kind of evaluate them as to whether they were good or bad. At this point, I'd kind of say the Santana trade was good just to get rid of the salary, even though we didn't get much back. The Benintendi trade, not particularly exciting one way or another. The Greinke trade really like because it brought us Juan Yepez. And then I like the Santana trade too. Gave us a starting pitcher and a really good top 100 prospect. Or the Perez trade. So pleased with how things have gone on that front so far, and we're going to continue moving forward with this offseason as we're going to be approaching the Rule 5 draft in a month or so. And our assistant GM adding a lot of value, suggesting that we look into the 22-year-old right fielder from Seattle, Julio Rodriguez. He's someone that he'd look to add to our roster. Yeah. I would absolutely love to add someone like Julio Rodriguez to our roster also. The issue is when we go to trade for him and try to make something work, we have no player in our entire system who would make it work. So I appreciate the thoughts on adding one of the top young outfielders in the game to our team, but I don't think it's something we're going to be able to pull off. Actually, just interesting. I wonder what else they would want if we offered them Bobby Witt Jr. Not that I'm going to be doing this trade. Oh, actually, they can't even afford to take on Bobby Witt Jr. They're in a mess financially. So what if we did Juan Yepez? Yeah, still nobody else who would make it work. So JJ Piccolo not adding a ton of value with that suggestion, unfortunately. But we are getting close to the Rule 5 draft now. Going to just take a look at our Rule 5 eligible players here. Casey Kalich we probably want to protect. We think he's 3.5 star potential. Yeah, he's actually developed pretty nicely. He's never gotten above AA, 25 years old, but looks like he could be a very useful arm out of the bullpen for us. So we definitely want to put Kalich on the 40-man. Ensure that he is protected. Why is it not letting me move him onto the 40-man roster? There we go. We'll take a look through the rest of these people. You can see 2.5 stars is the most potential of anybody who's left, and just 3 players who are 2.5 stars right now, all kind of mid-20s to late 20s relievers. Probably don't need to protect any of those, but we'll give it a little thought before we get to the Rule 5 draft if there's anyone else that we want to ensure that we have no chance at losing. And we didn't protect anybody else, and we're now here at the Rule 5 draft. Our scouting director doesn't recommend that we pick up anybody, kind of just looking at the best players out there. Jose Rodriguez with 5-star potential. That one looks weird. Yeah, he's the number 64 prospect in the game. part of the White Sox organization. I mean, the White Sox are good, but I don't know that they're good enough to be leaving the number 64 prospect in the game out there. Obviously, would love to pick him up, but try to, not just exploit blatantly problems with the AI. It's interesting. I was actually looking at the OSA ranking that had him as 5 stars. I must have pivoted over. Our scout looks at him as somewhat less attractive of a prospect. I'd really like to have him on the team, but I just don't think it would be realistic to pick him up. Eddie's Leonard, who we picked up last year, was not as good, and he was also from the Dodgers organization, where they're just so loaded with talent on their 40-man roster that one made a little bit more sense. But I don't think it's the right thing to do in terms of realism to think that a Jose Rodriguez number 64 prospect in the game would just fall into our laps. I'd like to do it because I think he could definitely contribute to us this season as a backup infielder with a nice bat. But I don't think in the real world he would actually be out there. And now kind of looking at our scouting director recommendations, the only other 3-star potential player is Alex De Jesus, 21-year-old. Looks like he might become a decent major league player at some point, but has never played above high A ball, so certainly not what we're going to be looking for. Uribiel Angelis, not a lot of power. Can play a bunch of infield positions, but none of them great. Hasn't been above AAA. Just don't think there's anything out here for us to do. Like I said, this is where it gets a little tricky, where you don't want to just take advantage of the game. And I know some people do. They're like, hey, he's out there. Let's take him, put him on the team, and build a dynasty. And probably, would be better for the Royals if I brought him on board, because especially now that we've traded Joc Pederson away, we kind of do have a spot on our 26-man roster that I think someone like Jose Rodriguez could fill pretty nicely for us. But I just don't think it would be realistic to pick him up, so we are not going to do it. We are going to auto-draft the rest of the draft and see what happens. And interesting, nobody actually picked up Rodriguez. That's really strange. Only Chas McCormick to the Rockies with the first pick, the right fielder, and then center fielder Victor Mesa Jr. with the 5th pick to Texas from Miami, the 2 only players picked up in the Rule 5 draft this year. Yeah, and I went back after the Rule 5 draft just to see whether we could trade for Jose Rodriguez. And it's interesting, the only player they'd accept in our entire organization is Spencer Bauer, who's the number 7 prospect in all of baseball, one of our top pitching prospects. So really kind of weird that he ended up exposed to the Rule 5 draft. And honestly, kind of weird that nobody besides us picked him up, but I think it was the right thing to do to, not just add him blindly in terms of trying to keep some level of realism in the difficulty, of hopefully rebuilding this Royals team. And the calendar is flipped to 2024 now. You can see still some interesting players available in free agency: Liam Hendricks, Mark Canha, Ian Happ, Brian Anderson, Tyler Duffney, Jordan Hicks, Luke Jackson, Tommy La Stella, Kenta Maeda, Herman Marquez, Mike Myers, Adalberto Mondesi, former Royal, Anthony Rizzo. So there's definitely some talented players that are still out there. If there's someone, really cheap in a month or so that's still out there, we might take a shot at. I'm actually just looking here at Joaquin Rivera, 23-year-old third baseman. He's raw, but he's definitely not ready for the majors. He's looking for $1.1 million. Looks like maybe he is just an international free agent. Yeah, free agent from Panama. No one signed him since he decided to come here at the end of November. I'm going to throw a minor league contract towards him. I'm guessing he probably won't go for it, but would certainly not mind having somebody like that in our system. And honestly, with it switching to January now, now is the kind of time when I start thinking about bolstering my minor league system. So kind of three things that I will look for typically. Players with strong leadership, work ethic, and or intelligence, just to bolster the minor leagues and help the other players around them develop and give us a little bit of organizational depth. Also, we'll be looking for players that just have untapped potential, potentially like Joaquin Rivera. If we kind of scroll down here, looking for some younger players, and there's not a lot of real young players who look like they might have untapped potential here, but Andre Sotolet, Jack Sawinski, guys that may be able to get a little better, and those guys aren't as young, so maybe not as much to exploit there. But look for players with a little bit of untapped potential who could get better to maybe bring into your minor league system. Players with great personalities. Wow, Gleyber Torres is a free agent for the Yankees. Definitely did not develop his bat the way that the Yankees would have hoped 5 or 6 seasons ago. Can play a variety of positions. Great leader, great work ethic. I don't think, it looks like he's looking for $1.7 million, so hard to imagine he's going to take a minor league contract with the Royals, but we'll throw it out there and see if he's interested in joining us. And then in addition to the, high leadership and work ethic players, I'll usually also kind of do a search where I just kind of limit the age to less than, say, 26 years old, and really just kind of look at the true prospects. And, Rivera, who we talked about, fits that. Not a ton of, big-time opportunities, but a player like this, Chris Allen, a 25-year-old with good work ethic, good intelligence, starting pitcher, great personality, hasn't been above high A ball, but certainly would be a respectable arm to have, perhaps at the Double A level. I think it's unlikely that he's going to develop much at this point into a major leaguer, but still a good personality to have around. Colin Brogum, 23-year-old, similar with his high leadership, who played an independent ball last year. Definitely is a minor league relief pitcher, good leader, good loyalty. With the fact that we made those 2 big trades to bring on Lewis and Rogers, we ended up, depleting our farm system a little bit. So, this is the time of year when I'm just looking for a little depth. Jackson Dvorak, 25-year-old, high leadership, high work ethic. Our scout thinks he could develop a little bit more. Right fielder, not much of a bat at all. He's played in the independent league for the last year after getting into high A ball in 2022. Great personality, a captain. Again, just organizational depth is what we're looking for. Not expecting to find anyone who's going to ultimately be a major contributor themselves at the major league level, but can potentially find people to fill out the rosters with good personalities and maybe help us win another game or 2 at the minor league level and help the players who are real prospects develop around them. This one's weird. Hunter McMahon says he's the number 30 prospect in baseball, but he's a free agent who played in the independent leagues last year with a 6.29 ERA. Popular in the clubhouse, good leader, good work ethic. I don't see how he is really the number 30 prospect in baseball. That is just making no sense at all to me. But we'll still throw a minor league contract his way with that good personality. Could be a good influence on others in our farm system. So those are kind of the things that we're going to be looking here, just trying to round out the options that we have at the minor league level. As I mentioned, I don't really expect any of these players, with the exception of obviously, Glaber Torres, if we brought him on, are going to contribute much at the major league level. But just trying to ensure that we've got good personalities in the minor league system, a little bit more organizational depth, and there's always a chance of catching lightning in a bottle with one of these younger prospects. And there were some players who, weren't thrilled that we offered them minor league contracts. Braden Bishop, Joaquin Rivera, who would have been probably the most interesting signing, and Jack Sawinski all said, hey, we're not going into the minors, but we have signed a few players to bolster our farm system. Jackson Dvorak, 25-year-old right fielder, 23-year-old reliever Colin Browham, 25-year-old second baseman Colin Gordon, 23-year-old second baseman Daniel Carinci, 25-year-old starter Hunter McMahon, and then catcher Grayson Grenier, who's older, 31 years old, really just organizational depth, but a respectable defensive catcher with a great personality, has been an independent ball for the last couple years. Certainly could see him being a useful player, maybe at high A or double A, just in terms of giving a professional backstop for our young pitchers to be throwing to, and also a good personality in the clubhouse. And we've made it to the start of the preseason. Just figured we would take a look at potentially signing one of our big trade acquisitions, Trevor Rogers, to an extension. He's open to signing a long extension, but average of almost $23 million a year. So given that we've got him under arbitration rights for the next couple seasons, that would be a bold move for us to lock him up for $26 million for 6 years, following an expensive buyout of his last 2 years of arbitration. So, unfortunately, probably not going to be able to do anything with Trevor Rogers right now. Do have a little bit of flexibility for next season. Jeff McNeil, we may want to re-sign, although he'll be 32 next year. Probably willing to let him play it out this year and then potentially sign him before he hits free agency. Similar with Joe Ross, Cam Gallagher. The one kind of young cornerstone of the franchise that we haven't locked up yet is MJ Melendez, who still has 4 arbitration years left, since he didn't come up till we traded away Salvador Perez midway through the 2022 season. So we've still got him under control for another 5 seasons, including this year, but you can see he's projected to start making some pretty significant money in arbitration, so it would be nice to figure out something with him also. Juan Yepez could also be someone to lock up. His arbitration numbers are not out of control yet. Still really like his batting profile as a corner outfielder for us with a little bit of pop, so may see if there's something we can do at a reasonable level to try to lock up Juan Yepez for a few more seasons. And then ultimately Aaron Ashby, who we traded for. He's only $1.3 million a year in arbitration the next 3 years. Like the lefty arm, stepped right in as our closer. He's from the Kansas City area, so popular. We may try to see if we can lock him up also. So not going to be doing too much over these last several weeks before spring training begins, but just trying to clean up the roster and what the team could be looking like for the next several seasons on the margins, given that we don't have tons of money to play with. Well, we've made it to the start of spring training. Haven't done too much. Signed a few other minor league free agents, and then we've also been rejected by a lot of more established players who we were trying to bring in on minor league contracts and don't really have any interest in doing that, which is understandable. I don't feel like we got a lot of competition in spring training this year. Barring injuries, our roster kind of is what it is, particularly in terms of the position players. I think it's really just kind of the 12th or 13th spot that may be in question. Some combination of Eddie's Leonard, Vinny Pasquantino, kind of fighting for that final spot on the roster, I think, and it's possible that they both could make it. Pitching pretty similar, just kind of the last couple spots in the pitching rotation, or not really the pitching rotation, the last couple spots in the bullpen, may be dependent on who performs better in spring training and or who's healthy coming out of spring training. But I think it's going to be relatively quiet unless we have some injuries. Are kind of working on building position versatility into a lot of people. Emmanuel Rivera, who has a chance at making the team, is kind of a corner infielder, trying to see if we can maybe get him a little capability in the corner outfield. Eddie's Leonard, going to work on getting left field capability for him, which should be pretty easy for him to pick up. Melvin Moreno, potentially utility infielder, working on third base. Ryan Kreidler working on second base. And then Jeff McNeil, probably most likely going to be a corner outfielder for us, but can also play a few infield positions, trying to see if maybe we can turn him into a competent first baseman over the next few weeks. So a lot going on in terms of just trying to add a little position versatility to some of the players on the big league roster, but I don't think there's a ton of actual battles for roster spots at this point, but there can always be surprises. And our fragile Jeff McNeil is kind of banged up, out for at least a week. We're only on March 4th, so there's time for him to recover from this knee tendonitis. But, the only concern we did have with him was his fragile injury proneness, but hopefully can just put him on the bench for the next week, and he can still come out of spring training healthy and ready to contribute in a big way to our lineup this coming season. And while we've been trying to nurse McNeil's way back to health, Nicky Lopez, starting shortstop, going to be out for 7 weeks with a herniated disc, so that's obviously not optimal. Going to send him to the injured list. Shortstop's going to be a hole for us without him. Nico Horner most likely will slide over. He can play it competently. Definitely increases the opportunity for Melvin Moreno to perhaps make the big club. Love his glove. Doesn't look like he's going to hit much, but he certainly could be an option coming out of spring training. And Ryan Kreidler probably going to get a little more run also. So going to be interesting to see what we are able to piece together without Lopez for at least the first few weeks of the season. Not going to be optimal, but hopefully he will be back and healthy in the not so distant future. And these Royals continue to get banged up a little bit as we get closer to the end of spring training. Kike Hernandez out for a couple weeks with a herniated disc, so not optimal there, but hopefully won't be a long-term injury for him. Also waiting to hear about a potential injury to Taylor Clark. We'll find out what happens there shortly. And we've actually been training Bobby Witt Jr. up a little bit at shortstop. Maybe the option to move him there for a couple of weeks while we're waiting for Nicky Lopez to get back once the season starts. So a lot of moving parts with the team right now, but hopefully we can get through the last few days of spring training without any other significant injuries, and then kind of figure out what the 26-man roster is going to look like before kicking off the 2024 season. So we've made it to the end of spring training. Kike Hernandez and Nicky Lopez both going to be out for a couple of weeks in the case of Kike, and in close to a month, or about a month in the case of Nicky Lopez. So that's definitely not optimal. Also put Taylor Clark on the IL. Has a strained forearm, expected to impact him for about 3 weeks. Figure in the interest of just being cautious, probably just put him right on the IL. Think we have enough kind of depth in our bullpen that that's not going to be an issue. So we are going to try to figure out what the final cuts look like and what this 26-man roster should look like. And it will look a little different because 3 players who were definitely going to be on it were are not going to be on it since they're going to be on the IL to start the season. So it could be an opportunity for a couple of younger players to get a little bit of playing time up at the major league level and see what they can do. Looking at the pitching staff, got some difficult decisions to make. Spencer Bauer, we did have the number 7 prospect in the game. He's never pitched above AA ball. Had him up at the spring training with the major league team. Still kind of has a little bit of work to potentially do on his stuff, as well as his curveball, his changeup. Could all improve. So we are going to start him down in AAA. He could definitely be a contributor before the end of the season, though. I really, really like his arm. Reed Golleman, another player, 23-year-old, soon to be 24, hasn't pitched above AA, did pretty well there last year, was our second-round draft choice just last season. We're going to start him in AAA also, but think he could definitely be a contributor in the not-so-distant future. And then the last player that we're going to send down is Casey Kalich, another player who hasn't pitched above AA. But I think all 3 of these guys could absolutely be contributing to our major league team before the end of the season. The kind of one addition, because of the injury that we talked about earlier to Taylor Clark, is that RJ Dabovich, who did have some experience spending all of last year in AAA, where he put up a 2.58 ERA, picked him up in that trade with the Giants a few years ago. That was the trade where they did the salary dump of Evan Longoria, so we were able to add him in that trade, and he is going to be pitching out of the bullpen for us this year. As I mentioned, did a really good job in AAA last season, so he is going to get an opportunity to see what he can do at the major league level with the rest of the team. So Rogers, Ross, Keller, Wesneski, and Jose Suarez are the 5-man starting rotation for the Kansas City Royals as we get ready for the 2024 season. Aaron Ashby going to be the closer, and then Dabovich and Nick Anderson, as well as Scott Barlow, Dylan Coleman, Scott Kobos, prominent roles in the bullpen. Chris Bubich started for us the last couple of years, going to be our swing man, potential follower, and in a long reliever. And if we have injuries, presumably he'll slot back into the rotation. And then Amir Garrett remains our loogie out of the bullpen. And looking at the Royals batters, the injuries to Kike Hernandez, who would have been our starting right fielder, and Nicky Lopez, our starting shortstop, have definitely opened up some opportunities for some young players. Catcher, no surprise, Melendez is going to be the starter, Cam Gallagher the backup, as they have been for the last season and a half. First base going to be Nick Pratto, second base Nico Horner, third base Bobby Witt Jr., Eddie's Leonard is going to be up with the big club. Probably will get some time as a utility infielder and could be our starting right fielder against left-handed batters, with Kike out of the lineup for a while. Ryan Kreidler in as a utility infielder again. And then Melvin Moreno, the free agent signing from a year ago, spent most of the year in Omaha. Love his glove. I just don't know how much he's going to hit at the major league level. Got a cup of coffee at the end of last season where he went 0 for 7, but obviously that's a extremely small sample size. But he is going to be the shortstop, at least according to Mike Matheny, until we get Nicky Lopez back. Looking at the outfield, Jeff McNeil in left, Kyle Lewis in center. Juan Yepez is going to move from DH to right field, at least until we get Kike Hernandez back. Vinny Pasquantino going to get a little bit of playing time, going to be our starting DH, with Yepez moving into the outfield and Kike Hernandez out. And then Daniel Cabrera, a 25-year-old who has hit pretty well in AAA for us each of the last 2 years. 317 average in 2022, actually before he joined our organization, and then a 322 average with Omaha in 2023 as part of the Royals organization, but put up 141 and 140 OPS pluses. So going to be a backup outfielder for us. Obviously, will be very interesting to see how Kyle Lewis produces. Think he's going to have a solid glove for us out in center field, and the hope is that we can get a little more offense out of him than we've gotten out of Michael A. Taylor the last few seasons. So we are cautiously optimistic about the season. I think that the addition of Kyle Lewis in center field, and then probably even more importantly, the addition of Trevor Rogers to headline our starting rotation should hopefully make us even more competitive this year than we were last year when we won 82 games and were 3 games out of the wild card. That being said, the prognosticators don't like us, predict us to finish in last place again with a 77 and 85 record. Hopefully we can once again overachieve their goals. They do expect that Bobby Witt Jr. again could be one of the top hitters in the American League, projecting him for 34 homers, 26 steals, which would mark his third consecutive 2020 year since he joined us at the start of the 2022 season. So although the media doesn't think we're going to accomplish much this year, we are still optimistic, have a little bit of money for free agents or more likely to take on some trades. We sold a few more season tickets, about 1,000 more than last year, which is going to be positive because we still are trying to improve our attendance. Big goals for this year: achieving a winning record, which we absolutely want to do, and improve our home runs. We will see how we can do on that front. Don't know that the addition of Lewis is going to result in enough extra home runs for us to make big progress there. So I think the goal we're more likely to achieve this year is hopefully having a winning record once again and being in contention for that playoff spot. So we will hop right into the 2024 season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.